right, George, I'll go ahead and get started. How's that? And if a few others gather, they'll be here just in time for you to start your panel with the great information. Again, my name is Adam Rock. I'm a Senior Director here at Hiring Our Heroes. Thank you very much again for joining us this morning on Transition Tuesday. Transition by Western Governors University, so we're grateful for their sponsorship. But today, though, we Booz Allen Hamilton and an esteemed George. George's going to take over in a second, but this panel is titled "How They Did It: Building a Career at." This is fitting, George, especially to kick off the week of that we try to continue to educate our transitioning servicemen and women, those veterans, and those military spouses out there. That next career. So you're going to take over in a second and talk about that. But I really want to thank Booz Allen Hamilton for the many years that they have not only supported us in uniform and what you're doing now, but Hiring Our Heroes and our foundation. You've been a valued member since 2013. You're involved in just about every program, George and team, that Hiring Our Heroes has, from our corporate fellowship program, our military spouse fellowship program, our hiring 100,000 military spouses, of our MCs. You're just doing it all. So you're leading the way when it comes to showing what it takes to be veteran ready. I know you've got a large company, you've got a lot of veterans, and you've got a lot of some part of the military community there, and you're going to talk about that. But we're just really honored to have you and the group with us. And you're going to Courtney's a military spouse from the Army, so thank you very much. Ashley is a Marine and Air Force veteran, and the intelligence, thank you very much, Ashley. And William is a Navy SWO. And George, you also were Navy, and I am a retired Army. So we've got all the services represented today. So this is great. It's going to be a fabulous session. I'm going to turn it over to moderator for today, George Bernlower, who's going to take us through the panel. And then if you look, participants, on your screen, there's a Q&A tab. I direct you to the Q&A tab if you have a question that you'd like to ask either George or the panel or myself, and we'll get that answered. So I'm going to leave it off to George right now to take us through this, and I'll come back at the end and I help this session. So George, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. We certainly appreciate the relationship with Hiring Our Heroes and the opportunity this morning to share some wisdom about the transition for our transitioning military professionals, those folks serving in the Guard and Reserve, our military spouses out there, and then, of course, veterans who may be considering a move as well. We'll kick things off with introductions. I'll start with myself, Bernlower. I'm Bears team at Booz Allen Hamilton. In the Navy, as Adam covered, I'm a veteran of the Navy. Spent most of my time in naval aviation. I transitioned out of the Navy as an aircraft maintenance officer. When I was making my transition, though, I wanted to do something different, and I discovered recruiting. And for most of that time, recruiting in the veteran space, helping men and women transition from the military and the civilian workforce, build military hiring programs and initiatives at Booz Allen for about a little over 3.5 years, until I recently just made my transition to our military and veteran. I'll go ahead and have the panelists introduce themselves as well, and we'll start with Ashley. Ashley, please give a brief introduction.
Thanks, George. Can you hear me okay? Awesome.
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm Ashley Harper Johnson. I've been in the military reserve for over 14 years now. Mentioned earlier, and since I knew I wanted to go, was on and off active duty while I was getting my bachelor's from the University of Texas at Austin. By the time I graduated, I was getting out of the Marines after 6 years. I went to work for a little bit, wasn't really finding my stride, so I decided to go back into the military and do my job. for the Marines, but I decided to switch to the Air Force to take it throughout retirement. So I did that, was also doing the reserves on and off active duty. After a set of long-term orders, I found myself in that transition period that a lot of active duty service members find themselves after years of being on orders. And so I decided to relocate, do my civilian job, or do my intelligence job as a civilian here in the DMV, and was doing that for quite a while, and was being a senior in it, I felt like I was sort of getting pretty saturated in my career. Felt like I'd done everything I could to Booz Allen after a recruiter called me and told me that I could add cyber to that piece. So working with Booz Allen as a senior analyst. Sorry.
Thank you, Ashley. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, Courtney Crosby. I'm a senior lead scientist in Booz Allen's innovation group. I focus on our joint combat operations project. So as part of that, I have a PhD in defense artificial several operational deployments, one of which is where I met my husband, who is because of that, I probably have a bit of a reverse paradigm where, my identity and experience working military projects kind of comes first, and that subsequently has enhanced, my identity as a spouse. So being able to leverage that, through the and kind of, adaptations and fluctuations that come along with, being in the military community, happy to bring that, to the table today. So. Back to you, George.
Thank you, Courtney. And then Will, how about explaining to the folks out there who may not know what a SWO is in the Navy, and then a little bit of insight as Hamilton as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Will. Been with Booz Allen. Friday will actually be 3 years, but prior to that, I was a service warfare officer in the Navy. So a lot of us are driving ships, managing divisions, but you're dual-hatted, which happens at Booz Allen. At Booz Allen, I oversee quality assurance and process improvement efforts for my client. Kind of being the whole dual-hatted thing, I also do the Armed Services Network. I'm one of the leads here in San Diego, California. So I kind of have the opportunity to both really give back as a consultant, but also give back to the community through programs like Hiring Our Heroes and different efforts within San Diego. But that's me in a nutshell.
Well, as Adam covered, we're going to spend most of this discussion talking about the transition, and hopefully there'll be some good lessons learned from each of us that the folks who are participating can benefit from. Will, since we got you queued up, why don't you talk a little bit about your transition? For example, what was your biggest fear in the transition process, and how did you overcome that?
So for me, honestly, I just really wanted to find that consistent, I wanted to find that really good career. I wanted to find that place where I can make a difference, put skills that I obtained from the military to use, and just felt like I was part of something bigger. It took a lot of soul searching, a lot of networking, a lot of relationship building, but I honestly just overcame the situation just through talking to people. I actually met someone at Booz at a networking event, and out of all my connections, he was the only person that took the time to mentor me, mock interview me, edit my resume, and really tell me about Booz and kind of build that relationship with me. He's honestly still one of my mentors now here at the firm, but it was through just talking to people and building relationships that kind of helped me through my transition process.
Courtney, how about you being a military spouse? Obviously, you didn't have to go through that military transition, although, just listening to you, it sounds like it's almost like a veteran, the strong connection to the military. What about, what put you on that path?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's kind of two parts to that question, right? So what put me on this path, obviously started before I met my husband, which was really just, my interest in defense programs and kind of how I leveraged my education to get a foot in the door. And so that's kind of evolved over time. And when I had the opportunity to deploy, it was something that, the high op tempo and kind of, stress of it all was something that I actually really enjoyed and appreciated. And so, I've kind of built on that throughout my career and, really honed a niche, particularly within the special operations community, for these types of solutions. And so I think going into it, I've had a lot of, transition, so to speak, in terms of, being stateside, deploying, coming back, living in different places, being assigned to different military installations. And so I think that was something that, I carried into my relationship, which, now with my husband still being active duty, I don't think that the fear is really around transition per se, but, how you make those career pivots and how you overcome those. And so I think for me, the question of fear, it's going to be scary no matter what. And so for me, it's been more of, how I can hedge those fears. And so, how I figure out ways to, confirm my skills, to identify career options that I can control. And I think that makes it less crippling, right? And so it's kind of taking the unknown and using it to my advantage. And I think one of the best examples of that more recently is, as a military spouse and with a husband that's still active duty, I have a unique perspective and opportunity that no one else can really bring to bear, right? We do travel around the US. We have to relocate quite frequently. It gives me insight into all of the military installations throughout the US. It gives different geographies that way we may be able to build business in and develop solutions for. And so I think I've really taken that on in terms of, I'm the only one that can do this. I'm the only one that's there. I'm the only one. So I think flipping the paradigm a little bit, how I approach that.
It's a very interesting approach to process. Ashley, you said you originally started your career in the transition. What was overcome with the transition?
So the transition, my biggest fear with pretty much any major transition has always been the fear of failure. Not the kind that everyone talks about in hindsight, like experience, but the type of failure that kind of makes you feel really wasted your time or that you weren't utilizing all the military gave you, or things like that. The best way that I found to overcome it really was to sort of push through the fear, push past it, because that you've set a goal for yourself. Time is moving forward whether you're paralyzed with fear or not. So the pushing through it, learning to pivot, and utilizing all that are allotted to us when we transition. Networking, having companies help you build your resume in a way that what you did to a job that you want, and things like that, and utilize that I worked really hard to get while I was in the military, I think helped the doubt in your mind sort of peeks through. What am I doing? So I think, just the pushing through and seeing the finish line is the best way.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I remember myself, even though it was many years ago, I think my biggest fear was timing. The military had taught me one thing, you know, plan, brief, make adjustments. So I was planning. I knew at about 18 months out that I was going to be making my transition. But I don't know about you guys. I didn't get any real traction to the as far as the interview process went until I was in this really small window of about, seems like it was just less than 90 days, which seems to be the norm, you know, for most. But I think that was my biggest fear, is this small window of opportunity to make a life-changing decision in terms of, you know, what's going to be my next career to move into. As far as you is concerned, Will, how is that military experience the work that you do now?
Honestly, my current role has nothing I did in the Navy, but it's allowed that flexibility for being able to take on different roles. So insight and not necessarily knowing what to do, but being comfortable with talking to different people, working with different leaders, being able to just kind of ask for help. I think having that kind of flexibility and just being able to work really, really hard has been able to make me really, really successful at Booz. I think oftentimes I look back upon different experiences within the Navy and I just get these like moments of, oh man, I've dealt with it before in the Navy, just on the ship. This feels just like that. And so I'm sure I can totally do this again. And it always works out. So definitely the military experience really aligns with what goes on here at Booz Allen.
Yeah, so it's kind of like those transferable skills that you were actually able to put to work. Same with me, when I launched a career in recruiting, it was more of a desire to change career paths and do something different. And I definitely pulled in transferable skills, but there was nothing I was doing in the military at the time that was related to recruiting. How about you, Ashley? Is the work that you're doing now kind of related to what you did in the military, and what impact has that had on the work that you do for Booz Allen?
Yes, it's directly. So for both branches, the Marines and the Air, I did intelligence, all source intelligence. So I do, and except when I came to Booz, they helped me add add a little bit to it by learning the cyber piece. And so as cyber threat intelligence, I got a really great opportunity to take what I had already been doing for over 10 years and add another piece, but I didn't feel like I had to start completely here. It was just an add-on, and now I feel like I'm an endless student soaking up all this knowledge, all the experience I got in the military. And then it was great because, being in the military, we're immediately thrown into some of these careers. So at 18, while I was also in college getting an undergrad that I different than what I'd be doing, in the, working with the intelligence community professionals, I was already working different sorts of battle spaces, whether it's strategic, whether it's tactical, and not a lot of that I've worked with 18. A lot of people did it after, after college or it was, but I felt like I was already 4 or 5 years ahead of them because I was already hands on keyboard from the age of 18. And so I think just the job experience that I got was being an analyst had a really big impact. And Booz Allen saw that and helped me sort of that. Much like William was saying, learning to translate your skills, and it's something that we learn very quickly in the military. We'll walk around and we'll say all these different acronyms and all these things that only make sense to us, but we quickly learn to translate that to the civilian world. With
Right.
I thought I was in development that had nothing to do with intel. Recently learned that those things are bridged. there and I learned 4 years of cognitive behavior. There's a lot of academic PhD professionals that are learning just that. And I was like, oh, I've been doing that since I was 18. So yeah, part and throwing you right into the fight has been
nice. You know, again, you're not a veteran, you're a military, but based on your experience, I mean, it looks like you said you've deployed and you've worked with so how's that working with the military? How's that impact the work that you do at Booz Allen?
Yeah, I mean, I think William and Ashley kind of talked to, you know, that impact being both from a perspective and, you know, the voice that you can bring to whatever career or role you have. And then there's the experience piece of it. And I think that, you know, the conventional thought process is to find that one for one. I don't think that's always the answer. Your occupational specialty might not translate directly to a civilian functional role, but your experience and the problems you've dealt with might. And to really always separates you from everyone else. Of that is, you know, at it from, you know, a point on the board, right? I have, you know, this many deployments. That quantifiable piece, I actually think is the first layer, but what by that impact is going beyond that, right? Could those things represent someone else? Sure. Everybody have the same MOS as someone else. So what's the impact, right? As you peel experience, it's more about conveying necessarily accomplishment, right? So wanted this problem and have the ability to, you know, mission requirement abilities. And I think that the most successful, you know, transitioning service members that I see coming into Booz Allen are really able to comment that William made, right? He's not necessarily doing the same job, has really figured that experience into something that's completely different. That obviously wasn't necessarily the case. You know, I get is that as a civilian, too many people that have the technical or education background that I have been in real time. And so, you know, for me, you know, the like peeling back the layer, the actual me that, you know, I give that no one else has. You know, I can kind of, you know, similarly to William and Ashley, be that bridge, because at the end of the day, you know, it really is a unique perspective, right? Like in my field, it's a scientists and algorithm developers, and that's all great. And they're accustomed to, you know, building solutions in a lab and in academic settings. But when you try to push that to a plywood talk in 120, it is not as easy. And you really look to our transitioning service members and military spouse community, common sense, and really help ground what we do.
Quick to briefly describe about the whole PCS piece you have to live with. I think you mentioned what 4 PCS that you've experienced in your career. What driven it?
Yeah, so you know, one of the things that Allen has really, you know, led from the is around mobility and around the stability that is community. Kind of take on the perspective that PCSs are are not necessarily risk, but something that positive. So we have folks that Booz Allen doesn't have business, and now we have somebody who's able to talk there, who's able to socialize and engage and figure out what problems we could solve. And so I think by approach, we do better leverage, the assets that we have in military spouses. So my personal experience, I've stayed on the same team in the same role, the same projects the whole time. I've been in different locations, and sometimes I've had to travel, but I think that we're seeing in the professional space now is that ability to really kind of, working from home, traveling. And so, for me, different places, it's really opened up opportunities to take my experience and actually improve what for the Defense Department. And I think that that's some needs to happen more, that it's a culture that, obviously Booz Allen has spent a long time cultivating that, how successful we are, not only at managing, how we externally engage with, how we're supporting military families by creating that stability and continuity for military spouses and their partners.
Nice. Okay, I've got one more question that'll go out to the three of you, and then we're gonna try to keep this brief so we can open it up for question and participating. But one last question for each of you. And then Will, what do we say we start with you on this? So it's a two-part question. What steps really set you up for success with your transition? And then, if you had a mulligan and an opportunity to do it all over again, what's something you would have done different?
Okay.
How about you, Will?
Steps for success. I think being open to talk to everybody. I think as I've grown my network and connections, I just learned so much from talking to people, whether it's like a different perspective, something I didn't know, a resource I didn't know about. I think half of the stuff I did during my transition was just people telling me, hey, you should go try this out. You should go to this event. You should go talk to this person. I was really open to doing a bunch of stuff. So I did a bunch of events that I would have never said yes to, but I did it anyways. And I found a bunch of stuff I'd never want to do ever again. But I think knowing something you don't want to do is just as good as knowing something you do, what you want to do. And then as a mulligan, I think I was a little apprehensive of asking for help in the beginning. And when I got to that point where I was like, okay, I honestly just don't know what to do. I need help with this. And just being comfortable with that level of vulnerability. My mentors, my connections immediately knew what to do for me. But when I wasn't able to do that, it was difficult for them to actually help me because they didn't know what the problem was. So having that openness to say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. I don't know what to do. What can I do? That really, really set me off in the right direction.
All right, awesome. Ashley, how about you? What set you up for success? And again, if you had that mulligan and an opportunity to do it over again, what would you do?
I think one of the first steps is to realistically prepare ahead of time. And that's also my mulligan, is that I didn't prepare when I was coming off my last set of large active duty orders. And so, I spent a little bit of time unemployed and everything like that. And if I would have asked for help, as William had said, and everything like that, I would have it would have been a lot easier transition. But the realistic prep ahead of time, so because let's face it, while we're on active duty, everything's laid out for us, what to wear, where to be, who, what we can and can't do. We get used to that. And so, when it comes time to start thinking about, whether it's re-enlisting, whether it's continuing orders, or to go off into the civilian world, it helps to have a realistic plan in mind. And so, we all know someone that got out and they got this 6-figure job and, things like that. And we think it's going to happen for us. But the first step is got to have a realistic plan of what works for you. Are you going to go back to school? If you don't know what you want to do, you got to start talking to people. You got to figure out your interest, and you got to research the realistic path that it takes to get to it. And so that's one of the first steps. I think, the next step after that, really is sort of utilizing all of the benefits that we have for when we transition, to include people that can help you with a resume, to help you network, things like this panel that can help just plant seeds of ideas, and connections in your head to utilize. And I think you're the last and one of, it's not the least important, but it's very important, is to you got to remain flexible. You got to learn how to pivot when something isn't working out in a timeline that maybe you thought, or you have this great idea of what you want to do, but it doesn't exist in your area. You got to understand that maybe relocating outside of a military, relocating on your own, might be something you have to do. So I think those are some very good steps that can help ease the anxiety of transitioning, so that you're not just like, oh, okay, well, I'll just go back into the military, you know what I mean? Which happens a lot. But I think it also will help sort of shave off that anxiety of the transition. And like I said, my mulligan, I wish I would have prepped and started earlier and asked for help.
Nice. How about you, Courtney? Anything that you would have done differently?
Nothing that I would have done differently, but I think sometimes we recognize all of these barriers to transition and employment, and location, and can I match my career the same way, and how do I even get started? And I think that my advice actually is to also look at barriers that you want to set for yourself. So, what type of company do you actually want to work for? What type of career do you actually want to establish for yourself? Not necessarily from a functional perspective, but the type of culture and community that you want to be a part of. I think that that's something that is so robust in the military. And the most successful people that I've seen have also kind of taken that to heart when transitioning, and really trying to find a place that mimicked that for them. Because, I think that the easy button is contracting, right? It's what makes the most sense. It's, what we've heard, to Ashley's point, we've heard of everybody that got out and got the 6-figure contracting job. And the reality of contracting, I think, is that, a contract may only be a year, or you sign up for another, 6 months deployment. And so it's really easy to get into this cyclical mentality, and not necessarily invest anywhere, because it really just becomes a sequence of jobs rather than a career. And so, for me, one of the questions that I asked when I was interviewing with different companies was, am I being hired as a capability or for a billet? Because I didn't want to be a butt in a seat, because the second we moved, that billet wasn't available for me. And so, yes, does probably extend and make a little bit more complicated the transition process in terms of finding employment, is creating those own barriers for yourself. But I think in the long run, that's what really gives that kind of longevity to, actually being able to develop a career. And, that's just one example, right? But for me, I wanted a company that was focused on mobility and development and cared about people rather than contracts and billets. And so I guess, you know, summing all of that up, right, I think that there are a lot of decisions that actually happen before you take on a new position. And it's really that understanding of, you know, how you value yourself. And, you know, you do have the opportunity. It's not just a one-way street, right? Like, transitioning service members are bringing something to the table as well. And I think recognizing your own value and being able to say, you know what, that's not right for me. And, you know, it's obviously dependent on circumstances and a lot of other things. But I think if you do have the space, you know, there are a couple questions about when do I start this process? You know, those are really good questions to ask early on so that you do give yourself that runway to, you know, find something that actually does work for you.
Nice, sage advice. Thank you. I think it's time that we bring Adam back in to the conversation and see if we can address some questions that some of the participants out there may have for us with the time that we have left here. So Adam, back over to you.
Yeah, well, hey, first of all, this was excellent information, a great panel, one of my favorites to date, and I mean that sincerely. You guys are a wealth of knowledge, and this is just great. Well, when you talk about, you know, tactical level stuff that is just so relevant and so important to our transitioning service members, those military spouses, that's really what gets my blood, you know, flowing really well, because that's really important to me. And that's what, you know, talk about some of your comments. That's what brought me to the current corporation I'm with, you know, Hiring Our Heroes, because it's my passion to continue to serve. But I'm actually gonna, before I answer those questions, I'm actually gonna talk about the two things. The one fear, though, if you don't mind, George, I also transitioned, you know, after serving. My one fear is similar to what I think some of you stated too, is the ability to find a job, right, and provide for my family. That is first and foremost. I know I need to do that. Retirement wasn't just enough. I've got 4 kids. But I think Courtney just stated it. What is it you want to do? I tell everyone out there, she nailed it. You have to figure out before you transition what it is that you want to do. Otherwise, you run the risk of being unemployed, right, for a very long time until you figure out what it is you want to do, right? So that goal, and what does it take to get there? Do you need another degree? Do you need a certification? Do you need another license? So then I go back to what Ashley talked about, is you need a long runway, right? It is a process. When you treat it like an event, then you will be unemployed, and then you'll be searching for what it is that you want to do. So the military, the Transition Assistance Program, gives you a runway, all right? It gives you about at least a year, maybe extended that to 18 months as you prepare to transition. You ought to figure out what it is you want to do, where you want to go, and potentially how much money you need to make, because that will drive some of your decisions as you get ready to transition. Then you will be more successful. You will land a job probably before you retire or get out of the military and provide for your family. And it'll all come into place. So tremendous information by each and every one of you. And I thank you, George, for facilitating that. So let me ask you a couple of questions, though. There is one about the Corporate Fellowship Program, which is part of the process. And Booz Allen Hamilton has been a tremendous partner of ours with the CFP, we call it, and the Military Spouse Fellowship Program here. But this person is particular, George, in doing mission assurance and anti-terrorism with Booz Allen Hamilton. You may jump in and answer that if you like, but I'm going to suggest for this person, the first thing is you got to figure out where the location of this is. And then we could direct you, Tony, to that program manager of that location, one of my program managers that can then try and work with you and Booz Allen Hamilton to figure out exactly if there's an internship program. So I will just say that in the chat box, Brett Gardner, our producer, will go ahead and put in Lindsay Tobleski's email information. And that person, Tony, you can email her direct and we get connected. George, anything you want to comment on Tony's question?
Yep. So as you mentioned, we definitely participate in the Hiring Our Heroes Corporate Fellowship Program. And we're in the process right now of establishing the locations that we will have offices participating in as far as, you know, around the country for the next cohort that's coming up. And then we do that evaluation process, you know, as each cohort comes up. We take a look at the locations where it makes sense, and then we do, you know, some research, find out, okay, of the teams in these locations, what are they focus on as well. And, you know, those opportunities there are high in demand, maybe some cyber related, sometimes, yeah, the mission assurance, the intel related type of needs at the particular location. But we do try to get that information out in advance to the program, our heroes, so they can, you know, help us identify, you know, candidates that could be a program. We're real close now for the third cohort, so some up as far as the internship, the fellowship program is concerned.
Great. We got another question from the real Army Soldier for Life, Colonel Prescott Ferris. Shout out to him, my battle bud. Listen, in your experience, what was more important in accomplishing your goals at BAH, the technical MOS skills you learned or the military soft skills? Jump over to William and maybe answer that, and maybe see if Ashley has something on that as well.
No, I think it was the soft skills.
Yeah.
I honestly think the thing that's worked out the best for me is just a strong relationship with the client and with my supervisors, and being work out issues, negotiate things. Yeah, just to keep it a really simple answer, it's the soft skills, the things that you can't really quantify, but are incredibly important.
Thanks. Ashley, anything on that?
I think it's the soft skills also. It kind of depends on the job you're going into. Skills, but it's also with the skills that I already had that allowed them to see that I was able to handle a transition of adding whatever. Because when you get into technical things, your technical skills will stand out also. He was saying being able to be flexible, navigate working with all these different types of leadership styles and things like that. A solid candidate also. So you got to be able to utilize everything that you've got.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, Adam. Sorry, I hope you don't mind.
Go right
but
ahead.
I think a really good exercise. I think a really good exercise to William and Ashley's point is one of the things I always encourage people to do is, you know, if you were to make a list of all of those hard skills, go through each one and say, you know, could this represent someone else? And if it could, figure out a way to tailor it to you. Have you been to a school? Cool. Well, there might be 1,000 other people that have also been at that school. What did you learn, or what did you take away from it that no one else can carry with them? You know, how did you apply that to a unique situation that, you know, demonstrates your abilities? And I think that that's a really, you know, easy kind of direct way to take those, you know, hard skills, which are, you know, arguably much easier to identify, and kind of go more toward that second and third order, you know, aspect of actually drawing out the things that differentiate you from every other, you know, transitioning service member, you know, with those same qualifications.
Excellent. George, I'm going to bring a couple of these back to you. You may either answer them or direct them real quick, but they have to do with the hiring process, it sounds like, at BAH. A little bit it has to do, as you can read these questions here. I think you'll probably answer about 2 or 3 of them just with by directing this to you. But at what point do you start to send your resume to BAH, right? Whether you're transitioning out or retiring, right? How early on the pipeline, right? And then why don't you just talk about that process of on hiring at BAH now?
Sure. So also, I'm going to invite Kim Rush. She's one of our recruiters that has joined the call in on this.
Welcome,
but I will
Kim.
tell you that as far as the transitioning military individual is concerned, you can play it a little safe when you're about 120 days out, but 90-day window, that's when you're going to get some serious traction. And that's been my experience, not just with Booz Allen Hamilton, but many companies, out there. Kim?
Yes, I agree. Most of our positions that are posted need to be filled right away, so we don't have the luxury of sort of hiring 6 months in advance. For most, need for you to do some networking with that recruiter or that hiring manager closer to your date.
Yeah. Can I, Kim, for a couple of things too, Kim, obviously BH is hiring right now, but about remote positions. Are you hiring for remote positions or on-site? How does the hiring process work? I'm assuming it's all virtual now. So can you touch on that?
Yes, our hiring process is all virtual, as well as our onboarding processes. Positions can be delivered remotely 100% of the time. Some of them we're making exceptions, but ideally we need those clients. So you will see in a posting if remote delivery is available, it will be listed there. And also just talk with the recruiter information.
Great. How about someone's asking if you have student loans?
I'm not sure about, actually. I need to do a little bit of research into that.
Sorry, I didn't mean
I'm
to
not sure if George, if you're aware at all.
knows.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one.
Tuition assistance program. It's aimed at continuing and allowing you to use those funds for certifications, continuing education, internally at Booz Allen. But I'm not sure about a repayment type program. Day one, as an employee, you are eligible for the tuition assistance, though.
Someone's, how about George? I'll direct this to you. Answer it as you like. Someone's asking about. They want to apply for BAH. Don't know if they necessarily qualify or have the experience. Should they still apply? How should they go about that process? They probably have some reasonable. Have the hard skills. What are your thoughts on that?
Pay attention to how the job posting is listed. The reality is, to get screened, you have to meet all the basic qualifications, or if you see a job posting and it says you have, and there's 5 bullets listed there, you must meet those 5 bullets. Positioning military professionals, especially, if they disqualify themselves from role for applying because they get wrapped around qualification or the nice if you have, that can obviously make those, but the reality is, to get screened and interviewed for one of our roles, you have to meet those basic qualifications. And then do yourself a favor while I'm on this. Don't just go with a generic resume when you apply us for the recruiter. And Kim, you can probably back me up on this, but take the time. Your resume does reflect, and it makes it very conspicuous for the recruiter that you meet those basic qualifications, that you meet those you have statements. Make life easy for that recruiter so that it's an easy match for them. Then make that phone call, that screen, and see if we can get the wheels moving to get you pulled into the interview process. Kim, anything else you want to add?
That is imperative, and you have to remember that if a recruiter is receiving 50 to 100 resumes, perhaps maybe even more for some positions, it takes a lot of time to go through each resume. So if I have to search to figure out what you may or may not be qualified for, I may pass and move on to the next resume that clearly lists the bullet points where they hit the basic qualifications. So be very clear. A lot of time is very tedious. But yes, change your resume for each position to make sure that it's clear that you are a fit.
In that add, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
With that, I could also add that ask about internal trainings if you're trying to transition your career. Also, like I was saying, with Booz, they helped me transition into cyber when it was going to be an addition to my analytical career. So, you know, when they recruiter found me on Indeed and they pitched the idea to me, that was the first thing I asked. I was like, well, are you going to train me? Because I know myself, and it's something that I think I would really need help with and support, not just to have to do it on my own and be ready by the time you guys are ready to hire. And they said, absolutely. And as soon as I got hired on, within a couple of months, I was in a cohort that got 3 cybersecurity, you know, certifications in the first 4 months of me being there. And, you know, it was a very supportive environment. And I know that there are other programs that Booz has for that, whether it's data science. So if there's a hot job market out there that you're really interested in, don't be afraid to ask that recruiter if there's on for that, because they have it. And with our flex ed, you utilize that money that you get day one of being hired, to pay for that training. So, you know, a good thing to have.
Yeah.
And then Adam, often those roles like that actually are described as well, you know, where we're looking to bring individuals on. Sometimes there's opportunities like data science, where frankly, there's more positions out there than there are qualified candidates. So how do you overcome that? And you can see some of those jobs posted there as well. So that maybe they'll focus on an Intel type because of the analyst background or an education, but it is a part of that job posting. You still have to meet those basic qualifications or those you have statements to even get pulled into a role where you're going to on training.
There's a couple long questions here. Give me a second. We've got one from Eric here. Triple Easy, my VA, chemistry, my ability, a new aptitude career. So I get they've got experience, they've got qualification. They don't want to be pigeonholed into that, and they want to delve out into other ones. I think that kind of ties back into what you're talking about, how to, Courtney maybe saying how to best articulate the skills that you have and maybe talk about. But anyone want to tackle that? They don't want to be pigeonholed into basic skills and qualifications they have, but they'd like to delve into something else. Courtney, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'll actually give an example George just mentioned. So for me, being in our innovation group, you know, I'm looking for scientists, you know, algorithm developers, extremely highly technical skills. Unfortunately, the DoD hasn't necessarily caught up in that domain. So it is impossible for me to transitioning data scientists because the MOS doesn't exist. And so, you know, it's a kind of reverse, but, you know, being able to express the aptitude that you have for something without necessarily to your clearance or, you know, your MOS or title or what have you, thing that I can vouch for, you know, in terms of, yes, we absolutely look for people that a foundational competency that we can grow against these requirements. So for example, you know, I'm really looking for somebody who, you know, has obviously, you know, high levels of mission relevancy, but brings something to the table. And it doesn't have to be, you know, certified data science capabilities. Have you performed an analytic function? You know, were you a financial analyst? Did you gather requirements? You know, on the flip side, maybe you don't have machine learning experience or AI experience, but have you worked for Futures Command? Have you been in a role where, you know, you were adopting emerging technologies? I think being able to highlight those things and understand why we're asking for the requirements that we're asking for. It's not necessarily that we expect an SCI cleared algorithm developer coming out of the Marine Corps. You know, what I'm looking for is somebody that understands the mission, can bring to bear their experience against these technical requirements, and has something that we can build from. And, you know, to your point, we have a lot of internal programs. We have a data science 5K, which is essentially an upskilling program. to cultivate those skill sets. But I think a lot of that is understanding the why behind what are the you must have. Why are we asking for those based on the context that you see in the description? And figuring out how to, you don't want to be a financial analyst anymore. That's cool. But how being an artificial intelligence lead, I can vouch for, and something that I highly encourage everyone to do. And talking to your recruiter, it's okay to be direct. I am this background and I'm interested in this, and this is where I see those parallels. I'm not a manager perspective. We work hand in hand with our recruiters in each of these domains and really do understand the candidates. I know who they are and why they're applying and what their background is. And so those are really important things to communicate, when you are doing your screening with your recruiter, because that information.
And Adam, just real quick on, not by design, it's just an amazing coincidence, and me as well. Will is doing something in Booz Allen that was surface warfare officer in the Navy. Ashley working in cyber. That's not what she did. I was an aircraft maintenance officer in the Navy with an engineering degree, and I launched a career in recruiting, and I built on that career in recruiting as with Hamilton. So to the question, I don't think any of us got pigeonholed, in the military.
Oh, great.
And to add to that, with the focus on not being pigeonholed, I completely understand. After a while, you start to feel like away from a phone, or even little things. The good thing about when you come onto Booz, you have these like monthly talks with your leadership, right? And so you communicate your goals, and I definitely, I know that there are so many just traditional intel jobs, but we had a backwards, and so if I were getting the search and everything, we were going to move forward with learning my cyber skills. That when there were a lot of really well-meaning contracts that were like, we really want her to work with us, but they said we're these are the kind of jobs that we're looking for her when she's done with these certs, and so your leadership is going to be very important, that you're not going to move forward with the goals that you are setting for yourself.
Excellent. Yeah. George, question, then we'll end it with some wrap up from each of y'all here. Are you able to talk about BAH's involvement with our, put you on the spot at all, but you can see there's a question there, has to do about, dealing directly with our program managers and tailoring the resume to some of the opportunities that you might have. Can somebody touch on that?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we're definitely a participant, and we try to be strategic with our focus. Not try to, we are strategic, because we're driving for a win-win result. To do the analysis, and we're basically just about done, and we're going to go forward with where are the needs within Booz Allen, and then obviously you're not guaranteed a job, you're not promised. We want to set that stage so that it can lead to it. So strategically, we try to look for what's in demand, how can we use the fellowship at demand, and then hiring our heroes and the program managers so that they can put a spotlight on, well, here are our needs. So moving in that direction, then this is the but we want to make the program the best possible experience, but also for the teams that they're going to get potentially out of the process.
Excellent. Well, this has been an excellent panel. We're a few minutes over our about an hour since we started late. I want to thank Kim for William, your service, Courtney as well, and Ashley. And George, thank you so much for the tremendous moderation of this. Grant here for answering some of those chat box questions too. It must have been a special operator or something like that. Listen, DAH is a true partner of Hiring Heroes, and we thank you very much. It's just been a lot of learning done today. So again, thank you all. Out there that have some follow-on questions, George, I'm going to turn it over to you. Where would they go to connect with you all?
Well, I'd strongly recommend, if me or some of the individuals on the panel here, I think you'll find it most on LinkedIn and making that connection on LinkedIn. But I also strongly recommend go to boozallen.com/career. A lot about just our culture and our hiring initiative, our focus on the military there, and then that's obviously where you want to go to apply to roles if you're ready to try to launch a career here at Booz Allen Hamilton. But make that connection as well with us. Networking, one of the key ways to move the process forward. And we do have a military recruiting team at Booz Allen Hamilton. So those of you who reach out to me, I'm happy to make that connection for you as well so that you can work with these folks who help with that networking process. It's their full-time job here at Booz Allen.
And as your website states, right, culture at Booz Allen, leaders of character. So thank you again very much for that. And so great resources. And viewing this, or if you missed it and recorded this, by the way, on our heroes.org website, you can go ahead and pull that down. And we're also going to continue our education process with preparing for the virtual hiring event, which we touched on this today. At 4 p.m., I'll be hosting that session as well. I wish you all the best of luck. Best to you, George, and the entire panel. Thank you very much for your participation today, and have a great day.